at the 35th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union in Niger, the statute to transform NEPAD into the African Union Development Agency was adopted. Estherine Fotabong, the Director of Programs at AUDA-NEPAD, joined CNBC Africa's Esther Awoniyi to break down the agency's new mandate.
The transformation of NEPAD into the African Union Development Agency is within the context of an overall reform of the African Union system to bring in more efficiency and effectiveness in the delivery of the African Union development agenda. So a recognition of the excellent work that NEPAD has been doing the last several years since its establishment, the member state decided, the political leadership decided that the NEPAD agency should be transformed into the African Union Development Agency to fill the space, the gap that was there in terms of the institutional landscape of the African Union system. An institution that will focus 100% in promoting and driving the development of the African development agenda through the implementation of Agenda 2063 and bringing into bear the African that we want.
Okay, so let's get right into the nitty-gritty of this. Break down for us, please, what this mandate exactly, what it entails, and especially what the agency will be doing differently now that it has this new status.
Right. So when the agency was, the NEPAD agency, it was in charge of facilitating continental programs, flagship programs. Now, the new mandate strengthens that role and says it should facilitate and execute priority development programs. It also added new elements to the mandate, including the bringing advisory service to African member states, supporting the capacity development of African member states, and acting as an interface, technical interface between Africa and its partnerships, development partnerships. Now, what does this mean in real terms? If we take one sector, I've been talking about agriculture a lot, so maybe let's talk about skills development. We know that for the 420 million young Africans between the age of 15 and 32, we have about 1/3 of those who are employed. One of the reasons why we have this high rate of employment is that the possibility of the kind of education we are getting, our young people are getting, the attitude towards certain jobs that you're getting, the kind of training that young people are getting. So we now engage with member states to work with them to review, for instance, the educational system. Are we just producing, degrees of people in English, in history, and so on? Are we training young people with the skills that they need in the 21st century job market, in the age where we have, the fourth industrial revolution? So our role as NEPAD is to engage with our member states, provide them with tools to be able to assess, from a systemic point of view, their national curriculum. Are they prioritizing the right kinds of jobs that will drive their economies, providing the kind of skills and competencies that young people need to be able to respond to the needs of the job market, to the needs of the private sector? Because you can have the private sector coming in, but if you don't have the skilled workforce, then you wouldn't have the ability of this private sector to engage and recruit these young people. So our job is to work with member states to support and facilitate the transformation of our education sector so it responds to the need of the countries and the continent at large, so we can be effective players in the global economy.
And I know a lot of African countries, and I'm sure you've also been following what's going on globally in the global economy. many African countries are cash-strapped. I mean, debt levels are rising to astronomical levels, and that extra cash to invest in things like infrastructure especially is just not there. And that on one side, and you also have the political will also that I suppose NEPAD also has had to, deal with. So how does NEPAD get past those elements where a country says, look, we do not have more money to invest in health, we do not have enough money to invest in more classrooms, more hospitals, more water resources, or water taps for certain communities? They just don't have the money. So in those instances, how does NEPAD come in? What kind of assistance do you provide when these countries simply do not have the money?
Right. That's a brilliant question. Of course, the needs of our member states are enormous from all the sectors that you just mentioned. You have to educate the population who are the future of the continent. You have to provide health. The governments have to do all of these things. The African Union Development Agency, we work with member states to encourage public-private partnerships. As we said earlier, it will be, it's not realistic to expect that the government is going to do everything, put all the investment that they need. As you said, most of our countries have this problem of cash liquidity. But even if they had, you will want to encourage the private sector to come in and do some of these things that the government does not have any business in doing anyway. So in terms of infrastructure development, when you can have a commercial venture through a joint public partnership with the private sector, we at NEPAD agency think that's the right way to do, and so encourage our member states to engage in those kind of conversations. So from our side, the NEPAD agency, the African Union Development Agency, through its infrastructure program, work with our member states to do feasibility studies, so the government have something to put on the table when it engages with the private sector.